for Indians, you don't care, you can't have boundaries with someone you love. See, our relationship with our family absolutely affects our mental health. Triggers is a very loosely used term. When we talk about mental health, or especially when we talk about human beings, there's a lot of gray area. With awareness comes a big power. That's a power of choice. Not every therapy session is where you have aha moments. Because there's so much pressure when you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
Pressure of relationship, pressure of finance, pressure of finding your identities, what are your values, pressure of what now. Don't judge yourself. Accept that all these emotions can coexist. Your 60s are the time where you can do things that you couldn't do in your 30s.
Why are people in denial of wanting to seek therapy? Hello guys, and welcome to this episode of the Good Life Guide. Today I have with me Meenal Mohite, a mental health therapist who has an experience of over 7 years in this field. She's worked with kids, adults, couples, family and whatnot. And I'm very excited to introduce her on this episode of the Good Life Guide. Hi Meenal, welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Dhira. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure having you here. So today's concept is going to be talking about mental health, and one of the most important things that comes in mental health, whenever you go to someone, they're like, did you check in with yourself?
True.
Right? Did you check in with how you're feeling? So how does someone do that? What are the questions that someone needs to answer in order to understand how they can check in with themselves objectively?
I like how we are starting with the basics, So checking in with yourself is basically checking in with your body or checking with the emotion. When I say checking in with your body, just taking a pause. Have I eaten well? Have I slept well? Have I had enough water? Because these are very basic things. Right? And your body is going to react or respond accordingly. That is one. I ask my clients to put a reminder in their phone for every 1 hour. And whenever that reminder goes off, just take a pause, 5-second pause. I'm not even saying take a deep breath. I'm just saying just notice your breath. If, say, end of the day, you're very drained, ask yourself, am I surrounding myself with people and situations that are draining me of that energy, of my energy? If yes, what do I do about it? So these are basic check-ins. These are basic questions that one can ask themselves.
And do these questions help them also identify their triggers?
Yes. Triggers is a very loosely used term. So rather than just changing the language, what do I notice?
Okay.
That brings the whole tonality of the situation, your body down. Trigger is a huge word. So we don't want to get into that. Just notice what happened.
Got it. I think, Meenal, the second thing that people usually struggle with are boundaries.
Yes.
And boundaries professionally or with friends are comparatively easier than in a family setting where you live with those people all the time. So how can someone set healthy boundaries in their family?
Now, boundaries is it has a lot of cultural connotation to it.
Right.
Like for Indians, you don't care, you can't have boundaries with someone you love. And
Right.
that creates a lot of, resentment and mixed emotions. So what is important is, you said healthy boundaries. Now there are three types of boundaries.
Okay.
There is healthy boundaries, there is rigid boundaries, and there is passive boundaries.
Okay.
Now passive boundary is, say for example, Dhiral, you insulted me and I'm messaging you saying, Dhiral, I didn't like the way you spoke to me, with a smiley face. I'm sending mixed emotion or mixed signals. Right. So this is passive boundary. Okay. Rigid boundaries are, I'm not letting anyone inside these boundaries. Healthy boundaries is, I am there, but I want to also choose myself. So boundaries are different types. Physical boundaries, how many times will I call you? How long am I going to speak to you? I will meet you only, say, during the weekend when I have time. So these are physical boundaries. Emotional boundaries is, say for example, between my parents, when they are fighting, I'm not going to be the messenger. You sort it out. Or how much information I'm going to share with you. All right. Financial boundaries. How much am I going to share about my finances with you, my savings with you? So these are certain kind of boundaries that are they kind of foster healthy relationships.
Got it, got it. Speaking of a different TG, you worked with a lot of elders, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming these elders are post-retirement elders who have passed 60, worked all their life. What does it mean for this particular group to deal with negative emotions? Like, there are some things like, do they lose sense of purpose? Do they need to, find new hobbies and gain that sense of purpose again? What happens there?
Now, I want to give a disclaimer about whatever that I'm speaking is not black and white. When we talk about mental health, or especially when we talk about human beings, there's a lot of gray area. So I'm not talking about extremes,
Okay.
right? Now, with retirement comes emotions of, say, redundancy, especially when you had a very structured and active life. So then comes a sense of loneliness, then comes a sense of, am I now a burden? Okay, there's sadness, there is grief. Right? Grief is that I have lost on my years of being active. So that sadness is always there. So some of them are very clear. They know after I have reached my retirement age, this is what I'm going to do. So the sense of purpose is there.
Okay.
But for some, it is the first time in their life that they have to actually sit down and think what is it that they want to do, not need to do. There's a difference. So what is it that I want to do? I want to get into reading. Can I join a book club? I want to mentor. Can I join, some NGO? So I have many clients who I have connections with NGO. I help them, reach out to them. They go twice a week, teach them, and that's fulfilling for them. So yeah.
Talking about your clients, I would love to know something about your experience. Could you share how you started this journey and what kind of clientele have you had?
So my journey started in corporate. I worked in corporate for 11, 12 years. But mental health and psychology was something that was always close to my heart. So I knew one day I will be there. So 2015 is when I did my master's. Post that I worked in NGOs, which was, working with survivors of child sexual abuse or minors who were rescued from human trafficking, working with them. Then I started Santwan with my business partner Surbhi Joshi. We were doing masters together. And yeah, we started that in 2019 and here we are. I work with children, adults and elders, and I indulge in individual therapy, couples therapy and family therapy. I have my specialization in trauma and I do a lot of body-mind work, which is through somatic practices, because the idea is your emotions are, everything is in the body. So how do we work with the body? So yeah, that is something.
Got it. That's great. Talking about, people who live in the cities, and there are many youngsters. I think majority of the youngsters have spent most of their life with their parents. But there are some people who move out pretty early and they live alone. Have you seen any difference in the mental health of these two segments of people? People who live with their parents most of their life and people who live alone most of their lives?
See, our relationship with our family absolutely affects our mental health. But the intensity of that effect or what kind of effect depends entirely on the relationship dynamics.
Right.
What kind of a relationship do I share with my parents? Are they people that I wait to go back home to? Or are they people that I just can't, wait to get away from? And they exist.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, people, even if they are abroad, like I have a lot of clients who are studying and who are young adults who are in abroad, right? If they know they have a family who are just a call away and there is unconditional support, there's a safety net, they're able to manage stress better. Whereas in India, when I have, clients who are staying with their family, but the relationship dynamics are not good. So there can be a sense of isolation, hopelessness, helplessness, frustration. So more than the sort of proximity, I think it's the quality of the relationship that makes a huge difference on how you deal with stress.
So, Meenal, talking about families, we do know that most of the times how we react to certain situations is due to our upbringing, and in the process, we learn and unlearn about ourselves, and we face a lot of emotions. Say, let's call them big emotions, like say anxiety, there's fear, there's frustration, there's anger, and most of the times, like you said, if there's an unhealthy relationship, it's towards our parents. How does someone deal with that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of guilt also that's there when you
Yes.
have these feelings towards someone that's so close or supposed to be so close to us.
Yeah. So see, now this is a very layered and complex question.
Yeah.
Okay, not something that I can address and that will and I can claim that I have answered the question. So my answer here is therapy.
Okay.
Okay, do your inner child work. Find the right therapist for you, and it is trial and error. It's exactly like a physician, a general physician. Somebody's medicine could be good for you, worked for you, may not have worked for me. Same with therapists.
Okay.
Don't if you've had one bad experience, don't leave therapy altogether.
Okay.
Go for therapy. You do your trial and error, do your research through references, get a good therapist, and this is where you can do the work. Because therapy helps you bring a lot of awareness, and with awareness comes a big power. That's a power of choice. Now I have awareness. Do I want to act this way, or do I want to choose this path? It empowers you. So my answer to this question is therapy.
Okay. If we say we come to the main topic of the conversation today, as young adults, we see the roles shifting in our families. What I mean by that is, say when we hit 25, 30, our parents start looking at us for guidance. They ask us, okay, how do I order this online, or how do I do this online banking or stuff like that. There is also a sudden realization in that you are given this authoritative power over your parents, someone who you looked up to for answers for all this time. So how does someone cope with that in a way? Because I'm sure there's like a feeling of, okay, they are becoming older, you feel that mortality is kind of setting in. So how does someone deal with that?
So what we're talking here is role reversal.
Right.
Okay, and role reversal can be challenging, yet humbling and rewarding. Okay, you are becoming a caregiver and you are taking responsibility for your parents. The first thing is to understand that you are going to have mixed emotions. You may love your parents from the bottom of your heart, but you will get frustrated, you will get overwhelmed. Okay, don't label yourself that how can I feel like this. Okay, don't judge yourself. Accept that all these emotions can coexist. Number two is look for friends or families who have either experienced this role reversal or are in the process of this transition.
Okay.
That support really helps, where you can openly talk and they're like, oh, even I feel this. That feels really that I'm not the only one who feels like that. And take care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Okay, our parents may have or may not have taken care of themselves, but you have an opportunity. Take care of yourself, and you will be open. You will feel less irritable, right? You will feel fulfilled when you're taking care of your parents. Understand that your parents have a lot of experience, to involve them in decision making. Okay, they will feel valued. Remember all the positive impacts that they have had in your life. Again, disclaimer, there are parents who may have not had, and there is also a situation that all your life you sort of resented your parents, but now when you have to take care of them, you're really liking it. Okay, don't judge yourself that why am I liking taking care of this man who has not treated me well. It's all right. So both situations can exist.
Coming to the part 2 of this question, how are these shifting roles, so to say, be perceived by parents? What do they feel? Like, can you share your experience if you've had a client who has probably seen that and is on the other side of the pedestal where they are now?
So both professionally and personally, I have had this experience, right? Like I said, you as the kid may have and will have mixed emotions. They are also going to have mixed emotions. So there will be a sense of pride that, look at my son and my daughter now taking care of everything. But there will be sadness, right? There will be a sense of, am I becoming a burden? Am I being invaluable now? Okay, how much am I burdening this person? So again, mixed emotion, and at different times of periods of life. So you will have some period of time where they are absolutely happy, etc. There will be some time when they are withdrawn. So again, mixed emotions.
Do you think looking at them as individuals as opposed to parents helps you understand them better? I mean, I'm sure it's not possible to do it all the time, but when someone makes a decision, maybe your parent makes a certain decision which is not aligning with yours, does looking at that particular situation as an individual, like if this person was not my parent, would I be okay with it? Does that help?
See, empathy always helps, right? And looking at your parents other than just being your mom and dad, and just understanding their relationship with their parents, your grandparents, it gives you some perspective, right? You understand that they are also shaped by their experiences, and that is why certain pattern exists. So definitely helps. Definitely brings a sense of empathy and compassion for them, which is very healthy for any relationship.
Got it. Is there a way where you would suggest people or give them some advice on how they can do that? Because it's a very thin line, right? You don't always know that how do you make the difference between the two.
So ask your parents, right? Ask them about their experiences. And it may not happen in the moment, okay? Take time, go back, ask that, I'm surprised you took this decision. Can you tell me what led you to take this decision? I always see that you have this relationship with money. Did something happen, or is this how you were taught? So ask them and they will tell you.
Got it. So Meenal, rewinding on the question of when your parents become dependent on you, there's this term called parenting your parents. Can you simplify it and just go a bit deeper into what it actually means?
Now, parenting your parents is basically you becoming your parent, the parent's parent. It means that you are taking the role of a caregiver, but you also need some sense of authority or assertiveness in the way that you're dealing with them, right? Like I said, it can bring up many emotions, and also how your relationship has been in the past is a huge reflection of how you're going to take this forward. Okay, approach it with compassion for your parent and for your own self, most importantly your own self, right? Speak to them, communicate how you're taking care of yourself. If you feel that your parents feel that they're becoming a burden, so say, no, I'm taking care of myself, this is what I'm doing, so don't worry. Or these tasks I've delegated to someone, so they know that you're not taking all the burden. So share with them, involve them in decision making, and when they feel that they're a part of your life, they also don't become bitter. Right? And then the response from your end is also different.
Got it.
So that helps.
Got it. And what about, like you said, young adults who live away? How do their parents kind of deal with this changing shift as opposed to someone who's living with or living near to their kids?
So in my experience, my friends who have left their families it's been many years, they sort of find support in family and friends, right? They find support, say for example, if they are living in a society for a very long time, so the neighbors are there, right?
Okay.
Maintaining relationship with them, you also being in touch with them, right? And any support group that is there, in the sense making sure they are part of that, or they are part of any travel group which is going. So all these kind of support help, which is nearby friends, families, neighbors.
So, what I mean to ask is, how do the parents kind of approach this situation as opposed to parents who live with their kids?
So yeah, when you live with your kids, there's daily interaction. They are there.
Yeah.
Right, they're there to take care of you, and my son or my daughter is going to come back in the evening and I'm going to share this. So that sense of connection and safety is always there. Obviously now the same happens through video calls when your kid has left, but that void is always there. That is what I've seen with parents. Again, they're very proud of themselves for doing what they've done for their kids. They have a sense of pride for their children who have gone and left there, because when they speak about their kids, it comes with a sense of pride, right? But that void is always going to be there. But they also know that this is my support system. I need to speak to my neighbors, be connected. This is my doctor's number. This is the grocery guy who is going to help me. This is where I go to when something happens. So they also have that sense and build that up. But that void is always there.
Right. Yeah. In terms of generally, people have certain age milestones, right?
Yeah.
There are the 30s, there are the 60s. Could you tell us specifically with these two age groups, what are the challenges that come up, and how does someone cope with these challenges?
There's a Netflix show called Baby Cobra with, there is a comedian called Ali Wong.
Yeah.
And in that she says that, I know I'm getting older because my Kindle is filled with self-help books, right? Because there's so much pressure when you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
Pressure of relationship, pressure of finance, pressure of finding your identities, what are your values, pressure of what now, okay? Pressure of understanding that certain relationships are not adding any value. And now you feel the grief that I need to get away from them. Pressure of your parents getting old, right? So you are, in your 30s, you are more focused on the I, in the sense, what is it that I want? The planning of the future, the home loan and this loan and that loan. So it is all about the planning, right? It's sad, but a lot of us don't have the time for your hobbies and personal interests. Whereas in your 20s, you thought that when I will earn, this is what I'm going to do. Unfortunately, we don't have the time.
Yeah.
In the 60s, your 60s are the time which, where you can do things that you couldn't do in your 30s. So a sense of purpose is very important. Okay? A sense of I still belong. I am still wanted. And also very important is you sort of put yourself in situations and not wait for people to make you feel like that. Be a part of groups. Like I have a client who is in his 70s, but now when I spoke about the want and the need, he's very clear, I want to focus on my wants now. Having said that, doesn't mean he does not have episodes of sadness or grief or nostalgia. Still there. We all do. We all have that. But he's very clear. I just want to focus on wants and not needs right now. Right? So I think 60s is all about what is my purpose? What do I want to do? What can I add some value to any other person's life, which is where mentoring or teaching comes into picture. And just enjoying the retirement if you've planned for it.
Okay, Meenal, expanding on what you just answered, have you had any experience in dealing with the older generation? What kind of emotions do they usually feel?
So there are many, but one that comes to my mind right now and very strongly is a sense of grief. Now we think grief is an emotion that we experience when someone you loved has passed away. Okay, grief is also I loved my job, I had to leave it I'm experiencing grief. I have to, this house that I grew up in, my childhood home, I've lived here for 25 years, I have to leave it, grief. Even in happy occasions, we feel grief. I'm getting married, but I'm leaving my family, grief. Studying in Australia was my dream, but I'm leaving my home here, grief. So I feel older generation experience a lot of grief for the time that has gone.
Okay.
For things that they could not do that they always wanted to do, and also a sense of nostalgia. Oh, when I was in my 40s I could do this, now I'm not
Right.
able to do that. So grief is an emotion that comes to my mind very strongly, something that I've observed a lot in my clients, older clients.
Got it. Speaking about emotions, can you give us 5 practical tips that someone can do on regular basis to manage their difficult emotions that come up in day-to-day life?
Okay, so pause, ask yourself what happened. He said this, she said this, then what did I feel, what was the emotion, and what is my perception of this situation, right? Ask yourself this, do this end of the day. This is what we say, journal, right? So do this reflection, okay? I'm going to repeat this again because it's my favorite. Put an alarm in your phone or a reminder in your phone for every 1 hour. And all I'm saying is you just need 5 seconds. Whatever you're doing, just pause. All right. We think that, oh, I exercise in the morning for an hour, so I've taken care of everything. You drink water once in the morning. Does that mean you don't drink it throughout the day? No. Similarly, your body needs that attention. Your body needs to feel. We keep saying that be in the present, be in the present. What does that mean? It means that you're just focusing on your breath. So do that. Ask yourself, have I surrounded myself with people, who are draining my energy? If yes, what is making me, stick? Now, again, these are patterns, something that you sort of unravel in your therapy sessions. And of course, therapy, right? Don't wait to diagnose yourself. You have a toothache, you go to the dentist, you don't wait for your teeth to rot.
Yeah.
So don't wait to diagnose yourself, because a lot of clients in their first session ask us, see, I don't know if I have depression or anxiety. So that's our job. We'll do that for you and we will guide you. If you're not feeling like yourself, or just generally, we therapists go to therapy, right? It's very important. So therapy is again one, people might feel I'm just sort of, talking and, about therapy because that's my profession, but it is very helpful.
Yeah.
So go for therapy, yeah.
Yeah, my next question is related to that, and it's, why are people in denial of wanting to seek therapy and, to deal with their existential crisis? I'm sure everyone goes through these emotions and they can't deal with it. Like, most of us are not equipped to deal with it by ourselves, but people are just in denial. And what do you think is the reason for that, for both the younger and the older generation?
See, number one is we're still sort of combating the stigma. So that is still there. Second is, when it comes to, emotional distress, we are just spending a lot of time differentiating between, is this really a mental health concern or I'm just not feeling like myself? So a lot of time gets lost in that. We as human beings, we get sucked into what we call as toxic positivity. You can do it, or snap out of it. Everybody goes through that. So then we feel, why am I not positive? So it's my problem that I'm not positive. A lot of people think that my problems are nothing. Why do I need therapy for this? Some people feel that when I go to therapy, if and when I go to therapy, I will have to take actions to change things. So that accountability is also scary. So these are few reasons I feel that people are a little apprehensive when it comes to therapy, because therapy is, not every therapy session is where you have aha moments. Your therapist is going to sort of, challenge you a little bit, ask you to make changes, and that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Change is scary
Yes.
for most of the people. Okay, Meena, we've reached our last question,
Okay.
and our podcast is called the Good Life Guide. So I need one tip of the day from you for anyone who's seeking a life of happiness and peace.
Now, this is something, again, easier said than done, but I'm still going to go ahead and say it. See, you are not going to go to a doctor who judges you for having a stomach ache. You never went to the teacher to ask, any problem, who judged you for even having a question. If a therapist judges you, you're not going to, that this therapist is not going to help me because she's judging me. Same with your own self. You're judging yourself, you're being harsh on yourself, you're not going to be able to help yourself. Okay, so compassion is something that we need to learn. There are a lot of resources, books, podcasts that talk about compassion. Go check that out. There are a lot of resources available. Go check that out. But compassion is something that will help us sort of, live a healthy life, improve our relationships, and foster growth. Because if you're not going to speak to your daughter, sister, or anyone that you love unconditionally, if you're not going to speak to them in a certain way, you have no right to speak to your own self like that, which is harsh, in a harsh way. So that's my tip.
Got it. Thank you, Meenal. This has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much, Theeral.
Thank you.